As a contractor, I don't pay for materials I don't use. So why would I pay for stuff I don't need in my mobile plan? That's why the new MyBiz plan from Verizon Business is so perfect. Now I can choose exactly what I want, and I only pay for what I need.
Right now, with MyBiz plan, get our best price, as low as $25 a line. Visit Verizon.com/business to get started today. New lines only. Price per month with 5+ lines. Includes auto pay and paper-free billing and promotional discount. Taxes, fees, economic adjustment charge. Applicable add-ons, prices, and terms apply. Guarantee applies to base monthly rate and stated discounts only. Add-on prices additional. Offers end June 30th, 2025.
Welcome to the Superhero Leadership Podcast, hosted by former CEO of Marvel Entertainment, Peter Cuneo. Listen as he explores outstanding leadership through the lens of successful superhero leaders. Here's your host, Peter Cuneo.
Welcome to Superhero Leadership. I'm Peter Cuneo. Today, we're thrilled to welcome a giant in entertainment law, Bruce Raymer. Raised in Teaneck, New Jersey, Bruce's academic skills took him from Princeton to Harvard Law School, preparing him for a distinguished career as a senior partner at Gang, Tire, Raymer & Brown. His client roster includes industry legends like Steven Spielberg, Clint Eastwood, Robert Zemeckis, and Taylor Swift, covering the spectrum from film to music. Bruce's influence extends into his roles on the USC Board of Trustees, as past chair of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and in numerous other civic and cultural boards, including the National Archives Foundation, an honor I had the privilege to sponsor him for. He's also a recipient of the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, where he reciprocated by sponsoring me for the same award. A little-known fun fact, the mechanical shark in the movie Jaws was named after Bruce, highlighting his unique footprint in Hollywood. Bruce's visionary efforts helped found DreamWorks, permanently impacting the entertainment landscape. Bruce, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us today.
Honored to be here, Peter.
Thank you. And, Bruce and I are old friends. I don't even remember who introduced us many years ago, but we first met professionally, and then I'm very happy to say, been good friends for some time.
Indeed.
So thank you for being here. Let me start by asking you a question, Bruce. How often do you do these kinds of interviews? Because my impression is almost never.
Well, I was going to say, I don't remember the first one or the last one. I'm not sure there was a prior one of this nature.
Well, we are very privileged in that regard. So again, thanks very much for being here. Bruce, you were born and raised in New Jersey.
Yes.
And later on in your life, you went through law school at Harvard. You were a graduate of Princeton. In high school, you were an all-state soccer player, a goalie for multiple years at Hackensack High School.
Right.
Your family was, I
also played freshman soccer at Princeton and varsity, where I was the goalkeeper, and in there as well as in high school, I was named all-state. I'm very proud of that. I know it sounds braggadocio, but it meant a lot to me. All tri-state in college, and all-state in high school, and I love the game. I still love the game.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. You were raised in what I would describe as a middle-class family.
Yes.
And from that upbringing, and obviously you did very well at a lot of things you tried, you ended up here in California in the entertainment business. And so hopefully in the next hour or so, we can talk about.
Let me say that was serendipitous. Ending up at the firm I've been with for 60-some years now, Gang Tire, I'm proud to say Raymer, Brown, and Passman, was strictly the result of having been recalled into the Army. Completing my second tour, the question I posed to myself is, now what? You can go back to New Jersey, you can go someplace else. If you went someplace else, where would you go? That was then limited to two places, Miami and Los Angeles. Miami, my closest friend from law school and a couple of my first cousins lived, and that was very tempting. But I then asked myself, what would I do in the summertime? Because I sure as hell wasn't going to stay in Miami. Los Angeles had the benefit of my brother, his wife, and a couple of kids at the time, later became 3. They were here. And that was an attraction because there would be some family. For me, it turned out to be the best choice I could possibly have made.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, to achieve what you have throughout your life, both I think at all phases of your life, you obviously had to have some very strong leadership skills, and that's what we like to talk about here, and that's the purpose of our podcast. Looking at the scope, the sweep of what you've accomplished, are there 1 or 2 big hurdles that you remember that you overcame? And can you talk a little bit about how you overcame them and what you learned?
Well, that's a much harder question than I think you think it is. First of all, I had the benefit of, again, I hate to overuse this word, but serendipitously ending up at the firm at which I am still ensconced and practicing. I was referred in by another lawyer in town who had been set up for me for a meeting by a friend of my brother's, my brother being in Los Angeles. He said to me, his name was Art Manella. His firm at the time had 12 people in it. It's about 300 today. Art's firm did only, at that time, tax work. I had no interest in tax work. But he said to me, after about a half hour of a very comfortable meeting, he said, listen, there's a little firm in Hollywood. These are his very words because they mean my life to me. He said, there's a little firm in Hollywood that never hires. He said, I happen to know they're going to be hiring 1 person. Are you interested? The only word in that sentence that was meaningful to me was little. And I said, absolutely. I went over the next day. I did not know what they did. I knew what they did in the sense that they litigated and they represented clients. And they were not theoretically, by reputation, an A1 law firm. It was gang tire. And it was only when I was being interviewed by the last of the then 6 partners, who had a red phone and a black phone on his desk. His name was Mickey Rudin. I must say that he was a superlative and as good a lawyer as God ever put on earth. And he took a phone call. I was asking, excuse me, I have to take this call. The red phone on his desk rang, not the black phone. He picked it up and he said, okay, Frank, we'll take care of it. It took a millisecond for me to figure out, God, that was Frank Sinatra, which the firm represented. He had come in 1943 from Martin Gang, who started the firm. Martin, being Martin, handed him off to a trusted assistant partner, and Mickey was his principal attorney, and I was Mickey's Sherpa, for want of a better word. So it was heaven.
But one of the things that we see a lot when we talk to people about leadership is that they did take advantage of opportunities. They even if they thought it was high risk or they didn't really belong, we see often people suffering from imposter syndrome, so to speak, in a situation, and yet those things were key to their success. And I think the idea that you didn't know anything, but you went for the interview anyway. You were discovering you were an adventurer in a way, and that's another thing that we see a lot. In my case, I've talked about my going to Harvard Business School. I was getting out of the U.S. Navy. I was a Vietnam veteran. I had been 3.5 years in the Navy, and the captain of my ship said to me, you should go to Harvard Business School. And I had just never thought of myself as an Ivy Leaguer. And it just wasn't, I wasn't lacking confidence, but just it was not in my viewpoint. And long story short, he really encouraged me. And long story short, with the help of the Navy, I got in. And I was absolutely shocked when I got the letter saying you're in. I never expected it. And of course, that led to a lot of very good things for me. So I've had that experience myself. There are other situations like that as well, where people stepped up for me that saw something in me that I didn't, and so on. So it's a common situation. I think it's a lesson for aspiring leaders or for current leaders looking to get better. Take your shot. You have nothing to lose if you really think about it.
No, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Take your shot.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at amazonbusiness.com.
One of the things when people think about entertainment, of course, whatever form of entertainment it is, there's always a lot of publicity about personalities. They're, quote, real at-home personalities as opposed to in front of a camera or in a recording studio or what have you. You've undoubtedly run into some people with strong egos. That's natural. My experience in entertainment is that sometimes that's a good thing. I think in the sense that it brings out a certain performance in people. But you know, you're the mediator in many cases. I know that, between parties that are trying to get together or frankly not happy with each other. And you know, any advice for our listeners, our viewers, on how to handle big egos?
Well, I really have to think about the answer to that question. I think that once you get into the side of the business in which I'm involved, that just kind of comes with breakfast. I don't remember thinking consciously about that, but I knew that had to be handled in an appropriate way. And I think the way you handle it requires an instinct that you develop with work, because if you think about it too much, you'll probably clog your mind and not be able, and render yourself almost useless. So it's more an instinct. It's like friendship. I think it's almost impossible to say, I want you to be my friend and I'm going to make it happen. It just happens. And I think that's the way you handle a big ego. I don't think you say this guy has a huge ego. Of course he does. But you just deal with it and don't make a fuss about it. And it becomes part of the scenery, part of the neighborhood.
When we talk about leadership, we often mention leadership instincts. I believe, to your point, that learning leadership starts when you're very young, and you never stop learning leadership. Bruce, you and I are going to learn something today about leadership. I don't know what.
Well, I will from you, that's for sure.
And I from you as well. But maybe just walking down the street, something will happen, and we'll continue to learn, even at our advanced ages. But learning leadership instincts starts, I like to say in my talks and speeches that I give around the world, starts at age 4 or 5. And most people, their reaction is, no, that's not possible. My child or my grandson or my granddaughter or whatever don't know anything about leadership. But actually, I think that at a young age, having a diverse set of life experiences as you're growing up is very important. And we usually talk about some of the adventures that people, our guests, have had growing up. We talked a little bit about what you achieved, but even before that, even before high school and Princeton and Harvard Law School, can you tell us a little bit about your family life, and as you look back, what you think started you on the path of, hey, I want to be a leader, which you started showing right away, actually, in your life, in high school and so on? Well,
I don't know that I can give you an articulate answer to that, because I think it's like breakfast. I mean, if you like to eat breakfast, You're going to have breakfast before you go off to school or to work or wherever you go. And I think people who take a leadership position, who might be given the leadership position or strive for the leadership position, and I think this is my case, is more a function of nobody saying, such as my mother or father, you should be a leader. And I don't believe I ever heard those words. I heard words of encouragement as to what I was doing and wanting to do. And I certainly treasured my parents beyond anything. And I was also fortunate to have an older brother by about 5 years, who really was old enough to be a mentor. By the time I'm 5, he's 10. And he was an extraordinary guy. Like you, after he completed military service, he was drafted, served 2 years, worked for 3, and then applied to Harvard Business. And he got in. He got in for all the right reasons. And just serendipitously, we both matriculated to Harvard the same year. He was in his first year of business school, I in my first year of law school. We would meet for dinner once a week, once a month, whatever. We didn't live with each other, and we were on separate campuses. But it was good to have him there. I miss him. He died a few years back. But he was like a second parent. That 5 years was more meaningful than it sounds. I think my first quest that, without knowing it was leadership, was when I was 8 years old. And I remember this because it was a major event in my life. I wrote a letter to Harvard Law School. And my letter said, "My name is Bruce Raymer. I'm 8 years old. I'm in 3rd grade. I plan to come to Harvard Law School. Tell me, how do I get in?" I fully expected some answer that would say, well, you work hard, you study, you behave yourself, etc. No, they mailed me a copy of the catalog. Now, what was an 8-year-old going to do with a catalog that was about an inch thick and solidly print from one end to the other? Nothing. Nevertheless, when the time came after college, I applied at the end of college. I applied to Harvard Law School and other law schools. I didn't know I was going to get in, just like I applied to a bunch of colleges, because my mother, being my mother, and the most wonderful woman, and somewhat manipulative, as good mothers are, you don't even know you're being manipulated. I always thought that she, for example, had whispered in my ear when I was between getting into bed and falling asleep, go to law school. The only thing I remember her saying to me was, don't be a pharmacist, because my dad was a pharmacist who worked 13 out of 14 days from 8 in the morning till midnight. And she said, that is not a good way to live. Do something else. She did not mention law school that I remember, but I think she was there at night. I really do. And I think my parents, my brother and I were the first 2 members of the family to go to college, I think. And I think there was a pride at my parents' level that never left, and frankly, in both of us. So I forgave Harvard for their insensitive response to my 8-year-old letter. But it was interesting. There's one thing I can't understand the thinking at Harvard Law School. When I had a friend who was a year behind me, she married a classmate of mine, and she became a Supreme Court justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She married my classmate, Marty Ginsburg. She left to go, in her 2nd year, she left to go to New York to be with him. They were married. And so she went to Columbia Law School, where she graduated. I'm told, I understand, we were good friends. I understand she wrote to Harvard and said, I've completed my 3rd year at Columbia. I'd like you to give me credit for the Columbia final year and give me a Harvard degree. Harvard turned it down. That's what I understand. What kind of thinking is that? Anyway, it's still, I think, the best law school there is, law school.
You know, I'm really relating to your stories about your parents, because in ways although my parents were in different fields, which I'll talk a little bit about. My mother was a saint. My mother was the most optimistic person. And you're right. She never told me you should do this, be that, do that. She just said, Peter, you can do anything you want in the world. And I knew, of course, I couldn't do anything.
I think my mother did the same.
But my mother was very optimistic. Every day I heard that. I never heard anything negative about the world or about people. I've often said that the greatest gift my parents gave me is I have no prejudices about people. I never heard this religion is bad, this color is bad, this sexual orientation is bad, this ethnic group is bad. No, zero. And my father fought against the Japanese in the South Pacific in World War II. I could tell he wasn't particularly fond of the Japanese, but I never actually heard him say anything negative about the Japanese. So I grew up with a sense of, the world is open to me and so on. Interesting that your brother was at Harvard, because my brother was also at Harvard when I was at Harvard. My brother David, who's passed, was 10 years younger than me. And I had been in the Navy and I was starting at Harvard Business School. And Dave was graduating from high school. And a public high school in Queens, New York. For those of you that might know it who are listening, John Bowen High School. And he had done super well. Academically, he was also a pitcher on the baseball team. They won the PSAL championship. That's the public school athletic league in New York City, in Yankee Stadium. And when he went to talk to his advisor about where he should go, she gave him a list of, very nice schools, but nothing close to a Harvard or the Ivy League. And he told her, well, my brother told me I should apply. I was encouraging him. Again, got nothing to lose. And so she poo-pooed it completely. Needless to say, he applied, and details are another story, but he got in. So he was a freshman at Harvard College when I was my second year, actually, at the business school. And I always wanted to see her face when he went back to her and said, guess where I'm going to go to college? I really would have loved to have seen that. But again, it's an example. I passed down to him what had been passed to me. Go for it. You got nothing to lose. And he was willing to do that. And so I think that's all part of it. Also for me, my parents were people who could not sit at a desk. My mother was an EMT for 30 years. The last 10 years, because it's physically a tough job riding in an ambulance every night, she was a dispatcher, but she was on the ambulance or in emergency for 20 years. My father was, in addition to his time in the Navy and in World War II in the South Pacific and in Korean War, he was a lieutenant in New York City Fire Department. And so this is what I grew up with. These were people who didn't sit at a desk. They got out there. My grandparents, similarly, 3 of them were immigrants, and they survived and did okay as immigrants to the United States. And so this was the culture that I grew up in. And so it was very much, go for it. Although I admit occasionally I needed a push from some other people on certain stuff, as I said. But I really think that was very important. I like to say I was born with an adventurer gene. It was, I think you were too, Bruce, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm not sure I was that, but your childhood, what you're describing about the relationship between you and your parents, your brother and you and your parents, sounds like I could close my eyes and see my own family.
Yeah. This issue of dealing with difficult people, of course, in the world I was in mostly, I was dealing with investors in turnaround situations. So I've done 7 turnarounds. Most people remember me as the CEO of Marvel Entertainment coming out of bankruptcy. But I ran into lots of difficult personalities in the financial world. There's a group of people called vulture investors, and they're always buzzing around when it comes to businesses in trouble. And so I very often had to deal with those personalities in the boardroom separately as well. And to your point, I think it was instinct. I don't think I ever had a conscious thought, oh, John Smith. No, there was no John Smith. But John Smith is really, I won't use the word, not a good guy. And he's really a problem, but it never occurred to me to make a problem a bigger problem, but to try to find a way, which worked out a great deal of the time, actually, but it was instinctual also. It was not a conscious thought at all. And I grew up in the melting pot of New York City, so I dealt with a lot of different people with different backgrounds. In my high school, there were 4,000 students. My class was 1,000 students. And so it was very diverse. And I had friends of all types. And I think that was another thing for me. I was growing up in New York was an advantage in terms of the instincts of leadership.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
Lasting relationships. We were talking before we started recording, and you mentioned that you have been with Steven Spielberg for over, I still can't get over this, 50 years.
I think it's more, but
Okay.
it's been a long while.
Clint Eastwood, something similar.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm a big admirer of people that have very long-standing, very positive relationships.
Well, loyalty is a very important word to me, and I dare say to you, Peter.
Yeah. So I'm knocked out by that. Well, so I'm married for 54 years. So maybe you joined with these people at about the same time I got married. You might argue my marriage is a loyalty situation too.
Well, Madeline and I just celebrated our 25th, but we've been together about, 32 or something.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about meeting Steven Spielberg for the first time or early on? How did that come about? What was it about Steven maybe that you obviously bonded very, very well? And he's obviously extremely talented. Has there been anyone better? I don't know. In the history of motion pictures, I'm not sure. But what was it about your meeting with
somebody, and I'm a little embarrassed to tell you, I'm not sure who, not just for the passage of time, I just don't recall. And it's not that something I'm trying to hide. I don't recall who referred him in. But whoever did, I still owe him a world of thanks, or her a world of thanks. He actually came in with two other people. He had a co-writer at the time who, if memory serves, her name was Claudia Ann Salter. And last I heard, she was in New York, and there was another fellow with them in this threesome. I'm blanking his name. It's been a long time. And he was like the producer of the pack. And they had a screenplay that Steven and Claudia had written, and it was going to Fox, as I recall. And I don't recall the film ever being made, or if it was, Steven, I probably didn't like it. But in any event, that's how it started. Claudia moved out of town. Michael went to produce plays downtown and ended up in Palm Springs. He died much too young. And thank God, Steven stayed. We had and have a very wonderful personal relationship, and obviously, I won't say more importantly, but certainly as importantly, professional relationship. I also have a number of partners in the law firm. I don't work alone, and they are spectacular people, lawyers, professionals. They're fabulous. And so we work together, and we think we do the best we can for the client. It's not about us, not about our name somewhere. It's about the client getting what he or she should get in every sense of the word, from compensation to credit to whatever else that may be, the control of the film to a certain extent, so on and so forth. Certainly Steven has been the exemplar of not only the perfect client, but a world-class director. I mean, it's hard to find, and give another name, who's accomplished what Steven has accomplished over his career. And it's been a career of all kinds of films. From Saving Private Ryan to Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
Jaws.
I'm glad you mentioned Jaws. Now we can talk about the mechanical shark. So I think most of our listeners and viewers probably have seen Jaws. At the time, it was a sensation because you really got scared, even though you knew that it was just fantasy. People really got scared. It was not technically a horror film, but it really struck a chord. And for some reason, Bruce, Steven and his cohort decided to name the mechanical shark that they used Bruce.
I think it was.
And someone told me that was based on knowing you. Now, what was the connection there?
Well, we've never discussed it, but it was Steven's doing. There were two comments I guess I should make. One is I have always described it as professional courtesy. Not Steven doing it, but that's why it was done. I don't know if that's so. I amuse myself with that line. The other thing is just to tell you, I am not given to press interviews. I think they're unhealthy for lawyers. They don't help and they can only hurt. But I did get a call from the Wall Street Journal. The only time I think I've ever gotten a call from the Wall Street Journal, except maybe to pay a bill. And this fellow said to me, I'm so-and-so, and thanks for taking the call, blah, blah, blah. He said, they have found one of the mechanical sharks, and it's going into the Motion Picture Academy Museum. What do you think about that? Well, I said the following, better it than me. He chuckled, and that's what they published. It's the only time I've ever been quoted to my knowledge in the Wall Street Journal. And I meant it. I've got to go over there and take a look at it again. I'm a member of the Academy, but and I think I'm a member of the museum in some way.
Okay.
But I've got to go over there and maybe buy a T-shirt.
Yeah, they should put a plaque up to you right in front of it.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I'll make a call, see if I can arrange it.
No, that's okay. Let it go.
Okay. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about Clint Eastwood? Also an over 50-year relationship.
Yeah.
I suspect a different personality than Steven, but of course.
They happen to be good friends. I mean, they've worked on films together, and not because of me. I mean, I won't say in spite of me, but they have great respect and affection for each other. Yeah.
But again, a very long career in a multiplicity of roles, very popular.
And directing, not just roles. Yeah.
A great director, Academy Award nominations, wins on multiple levels. Just amazing talent, actually. And what I hear, and I think you'll back this up, is that he is very, very easy and fun to work with.
Well, anybody who's ever worked with him prays for the opportunity to work with him again. And most of the people he's worked with, he brings back time and time again because it works. Works for him, it works for them. No, he's beloved, he's respected and beloved, as is Steven.
I think, though, and both of them are directors, directing is a very, very tough leadership situation. You have a multiplicity of different people, different backgrounds, different ways of thinking. It's very diverse. And somehow you have to meld this group into a team that will produce something very positive, obviously. And the personalities can be very challenging. You can have a great script and end up with a poor movie. You can have great actors and actresses and people behind the camera, and it doesn't work. So making a great movie is magic, and they have the knack.
Yeah.
Stephen and
Yes.
Clint just have this something about them, that really works. It's quite fascinating. I think we talk about, again, the instinct of leadership, because no one can possibly walk around on a set, for example, or in a writer's room, just thinking, this is how I'm going to handle this person, and then 5 seconds later, this is how I'm going to handle this person. No, it's instinct.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely. And I'm not going to drop names because I shouldn't, but I want to just mention 2 other names that come to mind when we're talking about the directors of consequence. I've also been involved with and represented Bob Zemeckis for, I don't know how many years, probably 40, maybe more. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I'm trying to remember how long it's been. And he's an extraordinary director. He's always at the cutting edge of movie making, so to speak. And Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, who, again, is a different type of director, but makes extraordinary films. And it's a great honor, frankly. It's a great honor for me to be involved with these people.
Well, I understand. We all have we have those. I have my list of people as well that unfortunately, one of my regrets in life is because I've had a lot of these diverse adventures in different industries and different people, personal, professional, moving around a lot, lived in a lot of different places geographically. It's impossible to keep up with all the really great people that I've met and known, through those adventures. It's unfortunate, but it's just not possible.
Here at the Almond Joy Factory, where tropical vibes abound, we use soft, fresh-tasting coconut.
The crunchiest almonds and delicious chocolate candy.
Ah, but do you know what our most important ingredient is? Sometimes you feel like a nut.
Sometimes you don't.
Almond Joy's got nuts and something even way better than that. Yes, Almond Joy is made with almonds and joy.
We have on petercuneo.com, which is, our superhero leadership podcast, is where you can find it. You can find it anywhere, actually. But one of the things we often talk about is a list of characteristics of strong leaders. So I'm going to read a list here, and let's see how many you think apply to you.
Well, this is going to take something I think called either the ego or the super ego, because if it sounds good, I'm going to say that's one.
I'm kidding you. I'm not going to read the list and put you on the spot.
I feel better already.
Yeah. But I want to get back to my original question about, I think you gave us some of the answers on going from middle class, hardworking family in New Jersey to where you are today. Any advice for our listeners that you'd like to leave behind?
I have a sense, which is probably not correct, and you would certainly know better with your experience. Leadership, I think, is more instinctive than it is rationally thought through. I should do this because it displays leadership. I can only speak about myself. And I don't remember thinking consciously, how do I do this? I know that I started fairly early, somewhere around the 3rd grade, when I think I mentioned I wrote to Harvard and said, how do I get into the place? Yeah. But I think that's when I began running for class office. And my recollection is, I'm not sure this is true. It's been a number of years. But I think I was class president in virtually every class I went through, though I must say I was class president in Hackensack High School, which was 3 years. Hackensack had what they called the 633 system, 1 through 6, or K through 6, 7 through 9, which was, quote, junior high school, and the last 3 years, senior high school. In high school, I was president in the first year of high school, the second year, and my 3rd and final year in high school, I lost to a dear friend who was the football quarterback. I've always thought that football quarterbacks can get damn near anything they want. Mere soccer goalies not so much. But it was a very good run. Hackensack, I ought to say, because you might not be aware of it. Hackensack was a great city, small city. It was the county seat, had the courthouse and all that. And when Wendell Willkie came to town running for president in 1940, my mother took me to the kind of the square in front of the courthouse to hear this candidate speak. I don't know why I remember that. I must have been 1940. I was 6. But maybe that's part of leadership. Maybe my mother taking me there, which, if it was a leadership climb, so to speak, she was conscious of it. I'm convinced of it. But in any event, the one thing I did do in my last year of high school, and I've lost track of this fellow, but a fellow came up to me, happened to be a black guy. I didn't mention that Hackensack was a great place to grow up in, simply because it was democracy in action. It was about a third Italian, a third Polish, a third black, and the rest others, of which I was one. And my friendships transcended all the lines, and there were no lines. We were one group. We got together. We liked each other. Nobody picked on anyone else. The one time when a big guy, and just toward the end of World War II, decided he didn't like me, I think on religious bases. He was of German extraction. He was huge. And I was walking, as I did once in a while, to high school. I walked to high school every day. My brother used to say it's 3 miles uphill both ways through the snow, which was not quite so, but it was 3 miles. And my neighbor, Blackie Mendito, he was called Blackie because he was George Jr. and there was George Sr. He was Blackie. And then when this guy decided to punch my arm, which I took a look at him, and I could have thrown a punch probably and gotten knocked over 5 times. Me, not him. And Blackie, God bless him, raises his finger. Don't do that again. That's all he said. He was the same size. He was not a huge guy. Never happened again. So I owe him a lot. But what I'm really trying to say is it was a town, it was a city made for diversity, because it was a diverse place. And I always wished my sons, I had 3 sons and acquired a daughter when I married Madeline. I thought they missed an opportunity when they really grew up in Beverly Hills, which is not nearly as diverse as Hackensack. But I wasn't about to move back to Hackensack to have them be better off. They've all done fine.
Your story about going to see Wendell Willkie and those memories, I have a memory that involves my father. So my father's, I mentioned, was a lieutenant in New York City Fire Department. And he worked 3 days on, 3 days off. He was never home, or he was always home. And back then, we would go in every other Saturday into Manhattan. His firehouse was Canal and Allen Street, which is Chinatown, and very famous at that point for very bad fires, loft fires, some of the worst in New York City. And one time I went in with him, I must have been 12 or 13 years old, for him to get his paycheck, and it was a piece of paper back then. And while he was upstairs in the firehouse, I was downstairs with some of the guys that reported to him, hanging out by the fire truck and so on. And they said to me, Peter, you should know something about your father that's very important. They said, your father's a lieutenant, and the other lieutenants in your city fire department, most of them, stand out in the street when we have a fire and direct us from the street. Your father runs in and directs us from the inside. And I'm not
surprised to hear that somehow. The apple does not fall far from the tree.
I wanted to say, I really think at that moment, and it's instinctual, it wasn't a conscious thought, it occurred to me that part of leadership is relating to the people you work with, particularly the people that work for you.
Absolutely.
I had a very good experience in the Navy, and that was part of the reason, because I was on the same shift for 3 years and could work very effectively with a lot of people, despite our ranks. But, you know, it was about, okay, understand what people are going through. Now, that's a lot more dramatic than I've had to with fires and in difficult situations. But always understand what people that work for you are going through, and understand what their job is really like to do. And he did. And I think it was that very moment, actually. And of course, I didn't think about it for another 40 years.
But it's instinctive. I'm convinced it's instinctive. But somehow, I also am convinced that the instinct is not necessarily God-given, but rather seeing those around you, particularly your parents and your siblings. Because that contributed, I think, mightily. My dad, literally, I may have said this earlier, literally worked 13 out of, we had a partner. He opened a store, and he and his partner ended up with 2 at one point, 3 stores, pharmacies. And at one stage, when it began, that partnership, they had 1 car between them. And they took the 14th day off in each case, so that they worked 13 days and then took a day off. And I saw that. I mean, I was aware of it. That, in a way, is a kind of leadership. In my dad's case, it ended up with him being elected president of the county pharmaceutical association, meaning his competitors and colleagues, but his competitors voted him in to run the association. And then he later was elected to vice president of the state pharmaceutical association.
Yeah, so, I mean, you saw
and he
this.
never
This
tried.
was your model.
I never saw him trying. It was all instinctive.
Yeah.
He was one of 7.
Yeah. One of the themes for the podcast that's very important to us is that there's less good leadership in the world than maybe ever. And young people are not learning leadership. And, you know, why not? And what can you do as a grandfather or as a father? What can our listeners do to encourage young people to learn leadership, and what kind of experiences do they need to have, and so on? And one of them, and I have a list actually on the pod, on again, if you go to petercuneo.com, you'll see my list of recommended experiences for particularly younger people learning to learn leadership.
Well, bless you for putting that together for the world.
One of the things that I talk about are team sports and performing arts. And I think that performing arts is a team sport, in effect. And, of course, it relates to entertainment. And people, again, having to come together, as we talked about, even as young people, very diverse group, and be melded into something that's very exciting and fun for other people to watch or listen to or whatever. So I think it's very, very important. The more exposure young people can have to diverse people in diverse situations, diverse geographies, etc., the more, but face-to-face is what matters. You cannot learn leadership from a Zoom call. You cannot learn leadership from a cell phone. I'm encouraging people to gift, if you will, their children, their kids, or people gift themselves with experiences where they're dealing face-to-face in the real world. Because I don't consider the phone or even the Zoom call the real world. I think human beings learn 50% of understanding someone else or learning about them is body language, not just what they say. It's body language. And I think somewhere along the line, probably in high school, my instincts, I gained the instincts to understand how people were feeling from their body language. And I think
knowing that, knowing what you just said, the content of what you just said, I think that's the ultimate instinct. Learning from watching what others do and how they behave and how they don't behave and what they do right and what they do wrong and how they honor other people or dishonor other people teaches all of us, without so much as a word, I think, of what the world is about and what your place in it can be and should be.
Yeah. Well, of course, I live in Connecticut. I'm in New York City quite often. I ride the subways. And But even walking the streets, I still find myself staring at different people and watching just what they're doing, how they might be reacting. It's not something I do consciously, just something for some reason, somewhere along the line, I learned to do. Bruce, I'm so happy you're with us today. This has been great.
Well, I can't thank you enough.
For
I'm
us.
totally honored and thrilled to have the opportunity to have this conversation. More to hear you than me. And I truly mean that. I've heard myself for a lot of years. I'd rather hear you. Well, this has been a wonderful moment for me, and I'm going to think about this conversation for a long time because I think I'm confident I've learned something in a real way from just sitting here and talking and mainly listening to what you had to say.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good luck to you. And we'll have you back on the show in another 10 or 15 years and see how you're doing.
Let me see. I don't think so, Peter.
That's it for this episode of Superhero Leadership. I want to thank my friend Bruce Raymer for joining me. Bruce's full bio can be found, and it's pretty exciting. His full bio can be found on petercuneo.com. I hope you will join me again next time. Until then, stay focused, stay driven, and keep leading like a superhero with purpose, passion, and integrity. I'm Peter Cuneo.